teachers of Reddit, what are some signs that a student is being abused or lives in a toxic environment? A sign of sexual abuse is a child constantly grabbing their bum or genitals. When I went through training for a job I thought, little kids are notoriously awful ass wipers, so how would I spot the difference between a kid with an itchy crafty bum and one who is being abused? Just a couple months after training I noticed a young girl who constantly grabbed at her bum, and it struck me as really odd. I also noticed she would hide when a parent came to pick her up, not in the he come and find me way, but I really don't want to go home way, so I brought it to the attention of the director. A couple weeks later she was gone, and we were informed both parents had been arrested for making and distributing child pornography. In high school, kids who don't ever seem to want to go home at the end of the day, who seem less happy / act out before or after school holidays. 9 to 12 teacher. Only 3 times have I had to call the abuse hotline. Twice I noticed at lunch duty. In one case a kid was bringing a lunch consistently that would consist of stuff like a single piece of bread and a container of pop, but not even a real container, like a can or a bottle. It was like a Tupperware container. Other case a girl went from typical happy teenager to choosing to sit by herself in the corner and not talk to anyone. I asked one of her former friends she would sit with, a girl who was previously in my class, whom I had a good relationship with, if something was up, what had happened, etc. And she got super upset and said all the girl would say is that her stepdad was back living with them. I took that one to guidance and they ultimately had me call along with them to voice our concern. Third one was a neglect issue. Kid would show up filthy, starving. I keep granola bars etc. in a cabinet in case a kid is hungry / didn't have a lunch, and this kid would clean me out. And not in a teenager craphead I just want snacks man way, but a super apologetic way. Thing is, I never heard back from CPS for any of them with the exception being the girl with the stepdad back in her life, and even that I just had to give a statement to police. It's weird that they never fill you in. Band teacher here. A lot of times when teaching kids in beginning band how to play their instruments early on you have to touch various body parts, hands of course, arms, hips, and shoulders for getting them into proper posture alignment. I always ask, before I touch anywhere, is it okay if I touch your? Almost all kids say yes. I've had to that have said no. One was a student with autism and did not want to be touched, and the other turns out was being abused at home. It's not a guarantee of course, but often a sign. Many kids who are verbally abused will do the same to peers they think less of, or to younger kids. If a kid is calling someone horrible things, often things that kids should not say like swear words or violent threats, for a minor offense like being annoying, they learned that from someone at home. You can tell the difference between learning it from an adult and just repeating something they heard on TV, because they will genuinely, really mean it, and you can hear it in their voice. Quoting something they heard on TV doesn't usually have a context the way that genuine rage does. Honestly, a kid who is just enraged all the time is a huge red flag for me, especially if they are under like 10. Thanks to online school, I can just look and see. One sign is constant full blast music or full blast music, or screaming in the background, kids or adults fighting or yelling, the background kids fight the student trying to learn on camera. I had a terrible experience as a student who was abused at home. At one point I had a black eye every month or so. Once I had to do PE in shorts, and I had a huge black spot on my inner thighs which spread from the genitalia almost to the knee. I always told people I fell from my bike. Broke crying out of nowhere regularly. My grades were awful, and I had to repeat one entire year. I was a teenager and actually asked for help to the school counselor, which, after listening to me, said, since your younger sister is involved, we'd have to act and call the police. If you don't want, we can just pretend we didn't have this talk. I was scared so nothing actually happened. She left me with a bunch of sort of propaganda pamphlets. She was into politics in my school town, asking me to give them to random people. Teachers kept on treating me like a rebellious teenager with behavioral problems, even though they made many talks about speaking up to the teacher if we had problems at home or we were being abused. This was Milan, Italy, 5 to 10 years ago. Now I can usually recognize anyone who had been beaten or abused at home when they were kids in a short conversation. My partner's mum is a teaching assistant in a classroom. She said one of the most worrying things she hears is, "Can I tell you a secret?" A lot of the time it's very innocent, but it always sets off alarm bells first. One sign of physical abuse, including severe beatings, is when students dress to cover every inch of their bodies. It's especially noticeable during times of warmer weather, when most students are wearing far less. These abused students have scars so searing that they can't sit back in a chair normally due to the pain from sores. Other telltale signs include occasional facial bruises or wounds to the lips where they've been punched. My perspective is high school, grades 7 to 12, difference in how they treat male and female teachers. I have had quite a few students who I can tell have had pretty toxic fathers because they project their issues onto me as a male teacher. Overly sensitive kids. No healthy environment produces a kid who's extremely emotionally unstable in high school. There will be a toxic or abusive environment somewhere in their life. Bullying, home life, or otherwise off comments that slip out because the kid feels it's somewhat normal, but it's way off what's normal. Like, "Don't worry sir, it's just that I got 8 hours of sleep last week." The content of their art that they doodle in the margins, how they deal with other kids, hyper-aggression or power plays, are red flags. How they deal with knowing they've got an answer wrong. Those who are from toxic environments can be very fearful of retribution for any imperfection from them doing things just for the sake of being in control of that thing. I have a student who shaves their eyebrows off, and another who will purposely be a few minutes late to every one of my classes. I caught them on time once by accident, and they walked right out to come back in a few moments later, so they were late. Apologizing a lot. Flinching when someone's hand is raised, being yelled at, or loud noises. Avoiding confrontation or eye contact, but that could also be something else. Willing to make a fool of themselves for attention. Acting out, etc. Swedish teacher here, in Sweden. My mom was a principal for almost 30 years at a school for kids aged 6 to 12, so she'd seen some bad crap during her years. She didn't tell me everything because of non-disclosure agreements on her part, but she did tell me some things. One such thing was a young girl from Somalia. She and her parents went back to Somalia on vacation, and when they got back the girl told one of the staffers that she had been cut with scissors down there. Now, female genital mutilation is quite common in Somalia and Eastern Africa, and extremely illegal in Sweden. So, the laws forces you to call Child Protective Services if you even suspect something's afoot. So the staffer did, and the CPS and police show up and place the girl in protective custody, and the parents are arrested and held in custody. The girl goes to an hospital and is examined, and it turns out the whole thing was a lie. The parents are furious and remove their kid from that school and threatens legal action. As far as I know, nothing came of it. From my experience teaching middle schoolers for the last decade, they smell, particularly of cigarette smoke, weed, or just general unbearable BO. They either never miss a day when it's clear they should because they are obviously sick, or they miss school at least 2 times a week because their parents can't be bothered to get them there. They either avoid adults like the plague, will literally run away from any authority figure, or are very clingy to adults. And on the more extreme end are things like wetting themselves, sign of sexual abuse, and showing a severe lack of empathy. Not a teacher, but I worked with kids in a restorative justice program, basically community service, and there would be kids who would have so many hours they would come in after school and weekends for months. We had some kids who would do something petty and stupid literally weeks before they were done, despite being fairly successful in the program. It was because coming in every day and having staff ask about their life, make sure they had lunch every day, and give some structure to their life was something they craved and didn't have at home. They would self-sabotage in order to keep it. It was so sad. Imagine how bad your home life has to be to choose to court-ordered manual labor rather than be at home. Reading all these makes me go, why didn't my teacher see the signs? State of hygiene. Are they washed, hair brushed, clothes clean and different from day to day? This has to somewhat be taken into context with the environment of the neighborhood, but even families who don't have many clothes will not want their children seen in dirty clothes at school. Kids don't like their hair brushed typically, but if it is continuously tangled, even matted, it would, and has, raised my interests. Marks in places that can't be explained. Consistency in unexplained bruises or red marks. Many children who are sexually abused will deal with it by showing an appropriate love/affection towards their abuser or teachers who are in line with their abuser, trying to always sit in their lap, hug them, kiss them. But it has a different feel than the hugging most kids show. Just like it can feel different watching two adults hug if they are friends or partners. They also tend to play with concepts that they should know nothing about when it comes to Shreks. Listen to what they say. I work with young children. They talk about everything, if given the chance by a trusted adult and not pushed. If you are truly interested, there are child abuse recognition/prevention trainings available, if in the US, and I'm sure in other countries too. Secondary. If a student doesn't care about content and doesn't seem happy about getting a good grade, just relieved. I've seen students almost break down when earning a poor grade on an assessment knowing the pending verbal/psychological abuse coming. One student, living with his father and 6 hours from his mother, was swore at and told he wouldn't see his mother for Christmas because he had to see the kid cried in my classroom after school and poured his heart out about not having seen his mom for 3 months. Berating a child and withholding seeing his other parent for a grade. High expectations are great. High expectations without support, however, in this case, emotional, put undue stress on students, resulting in a cycle of anxiety that can permeate their lives. That's it for now. Thank you for watching the video. Leave your comments below. See you soon.